Hello guys. We are going to have another space. This one, as promised, was supposed to happen yesterday, but didn't. And we are going mostly to speak about three main things. First of all, the aid. Small touch upon that. Then the absolutely, seemingly, disturbingly small creeping collapse of the forces to the axis that I already discussed. And just for the little history, I posted a referenced picture of the 20th of October 2023, just to show you that this was indeed what the Timor criminal had predicted as a continuation of the offensive post-Avdiivka. It is just, it has nothing to do with the bragging. It's like, because unfortunately, as you know, my accounts often get attacked and they disappear. Just willing to show you guys that it's not bragging. We done our homework, and what is happening right now, in a sense, it's a small vindication. It's not there yet. They are more or less in time. There are no huge delays, although the continuation of the campaign to get there was unexpected. Let's be honest with that. As much as I described in detail how I would see the takeover of Avdiivka, which was more or less respected, as much what is happening right now, the seemingly small collapse over Ocheretyne and Novokalinov and around the area is unexpected. Not as much because the Russians couldn't do it, but it's unexpected because usually the Ukrainians had spent so much time defending Berdishi and Semenovka, indeed, that nobody would expect a far more difficult task like assaulting a height as a Ocheretyne to be as quickly cleared out. Of course, you can head to Radio Timor Criminal on YouTube, and you would see the descriptions we had at the end of 2023. This was expected in case where the Russians would get the upper hand, open up the Ukrainians, and then sprint through the railroad. This happened, but I think it merely happened because on one side the Ukrainians were stubborn to defend Berdishi by thinking that the Russians would go straight at their defensive line, spread them out, opened up completely that axis of defense. I already spoke about this mid-March and even a bit late March when I said that we were seeing hits by Lancets, FPVs and so on between Novobamutivka and north of Berdishi, which meant that the supply road and the arrival road was completely spotted out by the Russians, and this meant that to get to Berdishi, they would have to come from the rear of Semenovka. Once again, we are speaking purely tactics here, and on that aspect, I would like to tell that I suffer so far no contestation, because both sides are more or less limited to the same kind of tactics, which is on the Russian side and on the Ukrainian side, small spearheads by armored vehicles, either a kind of recon by force, which happens most of the time by the Russians, or a potential mechanized assault, which is armored vehicles with infantry on board, pushing as far as possible to the positions they want to take over, disembarking. Sometimes the Russians are too mechanical and they do not, quote unquote, look around them, which means that, like what happened in Sinkovka, on the very first assault, they could have taken that locality with the first assault if the tanks would have stayed. Well, the Russians seem sometimes to do it just the same. They just don't want to risk the equipment, which in turn abandons the infantry in a certain sense. But here it seems to be completely different. not as much because there is no mechanized assault, but because, of course, the now MVP on the Russian side, which is the Air Force. The Air Force that was maligned for so long, the Air Force that was insulted, made fun of. Well, finally, it's making its way it felt. UMPKs, UMPBs, sometimes KH-35s. We've seen the SDL-85 also employed. This, of course, facilitated by the creeping SEAD-DEAD campaign that has been ongoing, the depletion of Ukrainian air defenses, and most importantly, the depletion of the Ukrainian forces in general. It has nothing to do with a specific area of the Ukrainian army. It literally looks like their most combat-ready units actually are also the most depleted. And the whole joke about the 115th being a scapegoat for the Ukrainians having to engage 3 to 4 units that are battered already to defend a linchpin of their defense. Sorry, guys, I don't buy it. And of course, you too, you don't buy it. It's just that attrition strategy that the retards at Rusi laid out for the Ukrainians, that you have to destroy as much and kill as much. Well, as I said, that thing doesn't work when there is not a certain quota that's respected, a certain threshold, and the Ukrainians never respect it, not as much because they cannot do it, but because they cannot interdict the Russians hitting them on their back. Really quick digression on that. We have seen the results of the attack on Odessa from yesterday. I literally doubted of them. I said it had to be an old video. No, it's not an old video. Draja recognized the location, geolocated it, and of course it seems absolutely cretinous what happened there. It's a huge truck and bus repair / storage base from yesteryear. About 800 meters from them, the Russians had already struck gold in 2022. About 1.3 kilometers from there was the commercial center that was hit in May 2002. If you guys remember, it blew quite nicely, not far from the airport. So generally speaking, Ukrainians are not getting smarter. What the Ukrainians are doing, actually, they're getting a bit more longer range or bit more tools to do visible damage. And this, unfortunately, doesn't work like that. I mean, winning the PR war, the Ukrainians have already won since 2022. We can all agree that there is not going to be any PR war won by Russia until the Ukrainians give up. But unfortunately, it doesn't help you with the losses. It doesn't help you with the situation at the front. One of the biggest problems that we have right now when it comes to the front line is that the front is still not very regular. So a lot of the Russian advances, if we have to really think about them, are still largely reversible. So on that aspect, I think that unlike what a lot of people are thinking, the Russians are not going to try and push as fast as possible. So even my own prediction towards Berezivka might take a lot more time, because what the Russians are going to do is, first of all, make sure that the front is a lot flatter. And they can also have the capability to support every area of the front, because right now what's going on Ocheretyne is simply that Ukrainians do not have enough of anything and are pulling back because otherwise they're going to get killed. Same thing for Nova Motivka, Solovyeve, Berdishis. For all good reasons, it's already done. Even a month ago, what the Ukrainians were doing mostly were ambushes and drive-bys by Bradleys, and that was it. However, FPVs remain a problem. Therefore, as I said, you need the flattest line possible, because of course this shortens also the area you have to man, and also you can cluster them. Right now, I already posted a map of what I expect. I'm going to repost it again for you guys so you can see. This is what's going on with Krasnogorivka. And as you can see, The map already is very problematic with a huge advancement that has been installed in Marinka, and then multiple gaps around Krasnogorivka. But if you take Krasnogorivka, the image is posted, by the way, if you want to check. If you take Krasnogorivka, then you seal by a body of water the whole right flank of the Ukrainian forces defending currently around the Karlivka reservoir. So the outer Karlivka Netalove force is going to find itself completely enveloped from its right. Basically, they would start to think twice. I would like to congratulate another Nafoid retard that keeps making accounts just to, I don't know, humiliate himself, because the last year, every time these idiots have been making these accounts to mock me, well, we can see what it has become of. And one of the claims was that basically the Russians were going into a killing area on the lower ground. Well, if you check it properly now, with the hypothetical takeover of Krasnogorivka, you can see that coming from the south is the contrary. The guys that are supposed to killbox the Russians around Netalov and Karlovka are getting themselves curtailed. So once again, a lot of things that we say at Team were criminal look sometimes completely out of whack when we say them. And the fact that we already, I'd say, gamed the current happenings in the Ocheretyne Ugledar line should tell you a lot more about what we see in things than what mostly you're going to hear from allegedly expert people. I would not try to recall the Blackbird group. I will not talk about Andrew Perpetua. I will not even talk about the Institute of Study of War. All these people, and I'm going to repeat myself, all these people have a agenda. They have a camp. They're going to protect that camp, and they're going to write bullshit for that. When it works, it's fine. Like what happened in 2022, Institute Study of War would be more or less on the money, because the general tendency and trend on the front would cover the bullshit that was said. Same for Rusi. Rusi is giving these estimates that make no sense. Like, for instance, I had a criticism with some Nafoid retard who supposedly was an artillery officer in another life, apparently 3 or 4 lives ago, because he's taking Russia's face value over the stocks of, I don't know, Iskander or X-55, X-101, and so on. Guys, we don't know. The production rates for anything right now defy any kind of estimates so far. Some French outfit, pro-Zelensky bullshit, had basically estimated that the Russians would produce about 800, 900 tanks in 2 years. So basically all the losses that we're seeing right now are supposed not to happen, because it's simply impossible for the Russian industry to produce all these tanks that are getting lost. Once again, as I repeat it, all this come from a problematic view of this war. And this problematic view is that we do not see what happens once these tanks are destroyed. Back in the day, 2022, the biggest problem is that the Russians would lose the tank and lose the ground. So the tank was definitely irremediably lost. More recently, we can see that the Ukrainians are trying to systematically disable or destroy the abandoned tanks, because they know they're going to lose the ground, and that's what happens. So most importantly right now, as I said, even I wouldn't start to have estimates, because, today I made a small post about a promo video from the 47th Mechanized Brigade from the Ukrainian side. And those retards actually showed everything there. They showed what kind of ammunition they use, they showed what kind of propellant they have and what they use. And allegedly also the area targeted. we can mock the Russians for a lot of things, but these kinds of infosec are absolutely hilarious on the Ukrainian side. And they also show something else, that the descriptions and the ideas that we have about the artillery in Ukraine on both sides are completely lopsided. I showed Russians charging a far more energetic propellant yesterday based on BTX-10. And today I showed a very old bag charge, probably from the 90s, before the MAC transition. So basically, MACs are the modular artillery charges. They look like a huge salami, white salami, and you have different cuts, so you can use as much modular charges as you need to propel your ammunition. Before that, you had bags, so basically you got small bags, big bags, full bag charges. But what I wanted to say by that is that on one side you have the Russians using far more energetic full bore charges, so staying farther away, and then you have the Ukrainians using limited charges, as I said, between 5 and 11 kilometers, which means that they were officially defensive. When you're on the defensive, you can fire at your maximum range because you are hitting the front line. Basically, they can be at 11 kilometers from where they're firing at maximum range. And it's still a good logic because you're meeting your enemy. The enemy is coming. But what I wanted to say about this is that the situation artillery-wise is not that bad. The problem, I'm going to repeat it, is the artillery tubes and the distribution of the force. With that in mind, it means that the Russians are going to go through the backbone of the heights in Ocheretyne, probably going to try and push towards progress just as a probe, not as much as, try and have the Ukrainians panic, because the idea would be just the same. They are going to try and thicken the movement right now, so they are already doing that down south. Gonna make contact after Soloviev with the forces that are already in Berdichi and Semenovka. The line is gonna be also more compacted and defended by bodies of water, which would allow them to, as I said, have a lot more efficient defense than they used to have until now. Now most of the defenses on Russian side were on flat and going down. Once they are completely master for Ocheretyne and they go upstairs in Arkhangelsk, then the logical move would be to go towards Novo-Alexandrovka. Once they are there, they can literally stop, because Novo-Alexandrovka is the last height before crossing, as I said, into the highway cutting Konstantinovka and Pokrovsk. So where from here? I think that once they, as I said, they are in Novo-Alexandrovka, they have it, they're going to mark a first pause, probably awaiting what I'm going to discuss right now, which is the American help. As you've already read, the first tranche of this mega help of $1 billion is mostly vectors. So basically they have artillery, short-range missile, anti-tank missile, ATACMS, but those were already transmitted, apparently over 100 by March already. HIMARS, that by the way has been coming back on its now official role of counter-battery asset for the Ukrainians. And then allegedly anti-aircraft missiles, but mostly for their ghetto-rigged short point defenses, and probably some for as a stock for the F-16 that's going to come. So generally speaking, the biggest problem that we're seeing right now is not as much that, of course, it's not all of the aid. As I said, we're going to have multiple packages incoming from, I think, April to June at least, which would be the transition period for the Ukrainians, which would be, first of all, they're going to digest what they received. Part of the aid on the first tranche was also vehicles. They're talking about a large number of recovery vehicles and repair vehicles, as well as MRAPs and a few Bradleys. The Bradleys that are being given, in my opinion, are purely replacement for what they have lost during the campaign to defend the Axis from northwest Avdiivka. I counted 17 to 18 losses in the Axis, so probably they are just trying to keep the units that are using the Bradleys, in this case the 47th, and the 3rd, because the Azov bullshitters also use the vehicles, in any kind of shape to try and stop any kind of push from the Russian side. In my opinion, the aid right now is more about giving them a moral boost to begin with, and of course trying to start and sap the Russians. As I always discussed about the area, it's very close to Donetsk, therefore the logistical line is pretty short. What the HIMARS missiles and ATACMS missiles are going to do, mostly on top of trying to hit things in Crimea, and as we heard from Jake Sullivan, he hopes that the Ukrainians would honor their pledge not to use the ATACMS within Russia. I do not believe that. I'm going to tell you as it is. But if the pledge to fire only within Ukraine is maintained, then it's going to be mostly Crimea and mostly Lugansk, which is the first rear base, storage base for the Russians. And then it gets distributed towards Donetsk and the areas in between. So the ATACMS is not going to be used for the same principles that the HIMARS was used in the attack in Kharkov between July and September 2022. They are going to use them as a counter value. I mean, right now, if you are seeing what is being presented, they are very happy to have wasted 6 ATACMS long range, apparently, for one battery of S-300-400. I find that pretty bad, given the results that the Russians are having with their Iskanders, but you know, choosers cannot be beggars cannot be choosers. So on that aspect, Ukrainians do what they can. The other big problem that Ukrainians are facing right now, but I don't see any solution with the packaging or anything that could be pledged, is the murder, the continuous murder of their early warning radars. The P-18s are getting murdered. I've never seen such a devastation. And when your early warning radars are gone, you need to start gambling with your air defenses. We know that Ukrainians are not very good at gambling with those kinds of air defenses, and so far there is nothing that has been sent there. Not even the German alleged supplemental Patriot battery has been gone to Ukraine as it stands. The problem that we have with this situation, where we are waiting what the Americans are going to do, is that the aid was extremely hyped by the pro-Ukrainians, because it was also the main reason why they allegedly lost all that ground. I would say that the reason why they lost that ground is actually based on the fact that the counter that they attempted last year damaged most of the combat units that were expecting to use for exploitation phase. And on top of that, it will also mean that the exploitation phase that doesn't exist anymore cannot be transferred or turned into something else. So in the case of the Ukrainian, I'd say, reserve forces being absent, you are currently looking at something far more mundane, which is the whole mobilization law that is supposed to be enforced right now. Is supposed to find a megaton of people to round up and send to fight for Zelejido. It's not massively bringing any change. we see the scenes, we see some of the political and executive acts that were taken. For instance, the stop of the consular services for male Ukrainians within the roll call age. This, I'm sorry, but the European Union should declare it as a violation of human rights. It's literally that, because you are depriving people from their consular services abroad, where they can at any point, given that they left Ukraine, where there was a war and the risk of them to get maimed or enlisted against their will, to the military services of the aggressor state, in this case Russia. Once again, this is just legalese. I do not think it that way, but legally, that's why these people were in Europe, most of them. But anyway, let's move on. So basically, we are not still seeing any kind of tangible result from the alleged mobilization law. I wouldn't sleep on it, in the sense that we need to see what's going on, how they're going to be formed. And in order to see the impact of the mobilization, some steps from the aid or supplies would need to be happening on the Ukrainian side. So basically, if you start seeing packages that look like shit, but are extremely important, like clothing, helmets, all that stuff, then you're going to start understanding that the mobilization is happening. It's not just on paper. So far, we're not seeing that. I mean, when you see the number of small arms ammunition that are being given, we hear 1 million here, 2 million there, 4 million there. Once again, when you start doing the basic calculus, so basically for small arms, individual small arms, you're going to have 30 rounds per magazine, a minimum of 5 to 6 magazines. So you divide everything by 180, sorry. And once you divide that by 180, you have one complement for one person for one day. Of course, he's not going to shoot the 180 every day, but it means that only one person can wear them per day at once. If he dies, of course, he's going to get recovered and so on. But this is how you calculate basic logistics. So unless we see huge amounts, over 20, 30 million small arms rounds, we aren't going to see any kind of convincing argument for mobilization. Of course, Ukraine can still produce its own ammunition in not sufficient quantities at all, otherwise you wouldn't need them. What Ukraine cannot also produce in sufficient quantities are weapons. And you remember last year, around the month of November, I did this space to actually mock the Ukrainians for trying to find small arms almost everywhere, including those 10,000 plus small arms contracted with a French gun assembler. Well, that contract is going nowhere. It hasn't been paid. It hasn't been made good on. And Vernet Caron, the company who was supposed to deliver those M4 type weapons, has yet to start the production. Once again, this looked already like a scam, typical for Ukraine, but it's not that much important because other weapons are coming. In a sense, some weapons from Canada, some weapons from Norway, some weapons from America, and so on. But the majority of these weapons that are pledged, that are coming, are still within the single thousand digits. So we may look at 15 to 20,000 new small arms. You may understand that with a mobilization of minimum 250,000, you are not even looking at 10% of those. And the funny part, I'm not going to lie to you guys, there are a megaton of countries, especially when I see Romania or Bulgaria that can furnish, okay, maybe not that many weapons at once. We can furnish easily 20, 30, 40,000 AK-74 pattern weapons, including in 556 if it's easier for the West to deliver the ammunition. It's not happening. We're not seeing them at the front. This, of course, makes no sense if you want to speak about that, because the Americans should have a surplus of M4, M16 type weapons. So in that aspect, there is no logic to start contracting new weapons, of course, unless the old ones are completely worn out. However, the biggest problem, once again, I'm going to repeat, is that the aid so far, what has been announced by everyone, does not seem to be very logical to what the Ukrainians really need. Let's take out for a while the human factor, so the number of people that Ukrainians need to put under the flag. Let's go straight to the hardware. Yesterday I replied to a pro-Ukrainian poster who said, oh, only less than 10% of the Gvodzikas have been destroyed. And I'm like, oh, I fully agree with you that if you believe that only 10% of the Gvodzikas that you had pre-war, and then you are being delivered museum pieces from Iraq, those two realities are completely normal, one with each other, then I completely understand why the Ukrainian military performance is going where it's going right now. I'm going to repeat, the biggest problem for Ukraine is going to remain the lack of absolute. Just a moment, guys. Okay, sorry for that, guys. It was just a a call in. I had to take it over. Okay, so basically, the biggest problem with Ukrainians right now is that nobody on their side is speaking the truth. On one side, the Americans know what the problem is. I've already discussed about this. If they want to palliate the obvious lack of artillery assets, the Americans should be starting to maybe not intervene, but trying to find a way for the Ukrainians to already have overhanded planes. So at least to be able to contest the sky from the Russians. This is not happening. I mean, if we want to be honest with ourselves, just look at the aircraft losses on the Russian side for the last 4 months. And look what the Ukrainians have lost in the meantime. Granted, most of the last losses on the Ukrainian side have been on the ground because they are idiots. But it goes to show exactly where the problem is. The problem is that for some reason, Americans want to make this war on the cheap. At the same time, they see, or at least they claim to see this war as something strategic. I agree with them, it's extremely strategic. There is nothing more strategic right now than defeating the Russian ambitions for them. It's strategic for a couple of reasons, but the main of them is that if the Americans need to completely reinvest themselves into the defense of Europe, or if Europe needs to start digging more deficit in order to arm itself for a war that's not going to come, because once Russia is done with Ukraine, whatever happens in Ukraine, Russians are not going to follow up to Berlin. It makes no sense. The whole war was to make a point. But this is mine. And therefore, the whole logic that's going to follow up the frenzy, the paranoia, but also the whole supply chain modifications that are happening. This is going to weigh more on Europe and on the US than, them trying to intervene and save Ukraine's ass in this war. The defeat, once you analyze it properly, it doesn't matter if it's the four oblasts, it doesn't matter if it's the whole eastern bank of the Dnieper. What matters for America is that the danger that a Russian victory, whatever it is, represents for its projection on the Asia Pacific. But not only that, but also the self-sustainment of the European economy should not be there. Americans want this war maybe to keep going for a while because they want to weaken Russia. But what they don't want is that we go into this phase where the Europeans are going to try and feed up a war and feed up their own military war machine and go into this frenzy where you're going to have a real Cold War with a real Iron Curtain. The world economy right now cannot take it. Europeans are already paying a huge price for this war. They are entertaining Russia as well. I'm not saying the contrary, despite the rather good economic results for a country that is as sanctioned as themselves. But generally speaking, this is what the Americans don't want. So when you see how strategic a Russian defeat is in Ukraine, you see what the kind of shit the Americans are doing for the Ukrainians. Question arises: have they understood the end game of this kind of war? I'm not saying what might happen in 2 years. I'm saying right now, what's going on with these shitty packages, with this, we're going to have 6 planes or 8 planes by the end of 2024. And I'm like, guys, what the hell? There is nothing, smart about this. Because meanwhile, as I said, you are going to boil up the situation within the Ukrainian territories themselves. You already have 500,000 people that cannot have access to consular services. These guys, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to disappear. They're not going to come back in Ukraine. And we're speaking about people who you need for later, and not just for the war. You need it for the rebuilding, for whatever happens after. And nobody's saying anything to the Ukrainians about this. Nobody's telling them, this is misjudged, this is bullshit, you're making a mistake here. And this is where you're going to lose the war, actually. And also, there is still this belief into the merits of superior Western technology. But there is no volume of that superior Western technology to go with the superiority. And that's why we have the shittiest strike ever by ballistic missile in Jankoi. That's why we have over 150 alleged Western tanks that, apart from the Leopard, who, once again, has still not fought another tank in this war. This is how bad it is. They are 70% out of service. Abrams tried to engage in Berdichi. 4 were lost, gone. Probably 7 in total, but 4 are still there. They're not moving. Challenger, I'm not gonna even fucking start to discuss about it. 1 was lost, and then they disappeared. The Ukrainians are complaining about the weight, and so on and so on and so on. So once you analyze it, everybody's saying that long-term Russians are fucked because the artillery production is going to go up. I'm like, I'm fine with that. But where are your guns? The French this year and next year, they are planning for 70 plus barrels. And I'm like, fine. Ukraine loses on tape every single fucking year, 350 as a minimum. We're going back to the systems problem, to the force regeneration that's not there. And once the force regeneration is not there, that means that you're going to keep building this stuff. But then you see how they use them. So on one side, they're like, yeah, the Caesar is the best thing ever since, I don't know, Camembert or whatever. But then you see these guys using what looks like a Paladin or a M109 A4, whatever, doesn't really matter, with charges that fire at 11 kilometers. And you're like, what's the point? The whole point of a system like Caesar, Paladin, and so on is because it's supposed to have a longer reach than the Russian pieces. But you stay there like, hello, I'm here, fuck me up. Where's the tank production as well? How are the Ukrainians going to start going to the offensive? Where's the capability to build, repair, and maintain tanks is shit. Yes, there is a bright spot with armored vehicles. Everybody's giving them. They are supposed to have 950 raw shells, 1,000 delivered, but a lot of them probably, the initial ones got blown up. They should have maps and stuff, Huskies. So they should be back to that map force that they had before the counter in 2023. But then what? What's the rest? Where are the IVs? Are they really going to assault with M113s or EPRs or all this shit? I'm not speaking about SPGs. Nothing else. MLRS. Where are these things? We're not going to speak about interceptors when the Americans, if they're lucky, are going to produce 650 per year. But the Russians shoot, in average, as a minimum, 2 to 3 times worthy of interception weapons. So how? So basically, what we're seeing is probably a establishment of the same kind of level of force that was present in January 2023 to up to May 2023. We know already that that level of force is not sufficient for a counteroffensive, and maybe the newfangled F-16s, all 8 of them, are going to change the game. Maybe the 100, 200, 300, 400 ATACMS are going to change the game. The problem, I'm going to repeat it, the problem as it stands right now is that the quantity delivered to Ukraine makes the Ukrainians double guess everything. And then you have very limited results, like the attack on Jankoy. Again, I cannot believe these guys fired 6 ATACMS for that one. Because allegedly, if they have 110 or over 100, but let's say 110, you just fired almost 5% of that stuff in one assault, and you took 4 tells, took out 4 tells, of which the Russians are probably going to replace them within the fucking day. It's a score. I'm not saying it's not a score, but the real value of that is what? And the strike on Jankoy was all over the base, so they were expecting to see helicopters, planes, and all that stuff. None of that was hit. So what's going on here? And Ocheretyne is, I think, the leading example of that, is that the Ukrainians are panicking. And what they want is a bit like a gambler. They think that the next one's going to be the huge score. However, as I said, do not sleep on the American help. We will have to see what are going to be the next steps, and we'll have to see if the Americans are going to start grabbing the Ukrainians by the hand and leading them instead of letting them do their own choices. Because so far, every time the Americans have planned an operation, it has gone rather good. Every time the Ukrainians have taken the leading role, it has been shit. Of course, the Russians have changed. They're not the same. This is not Russia 2022. I would like to have a lot of the war equipment back from 2022 and restart in 2023 with this kind of mentality. Trust me, guys, it would be a completely different thing right now. Of course, hindsight 2020. And of course, the initial phase also led to the capture of the land that is helping Russia attract the Ukrainians. So you cannot, throw everything out. Some of the initial damage was substantial. Let's not laugh about that. For a long while, a lot of people have mocked the Russians about their incapacity of conducting that, but very recently, a clip from Russian No Context Telegram showed that the Russians probably on the very first day had blown up 12 to 14 batteries and all over the place. We're not speaking in Kharkov or in Kiev. No, all over the place. They nuked everything that was available to them. And of course, unfortunately, because it wasn't such a secret anymore, thanks to the Americans, a lot of hardware was moved. And I also posted a video of a small book battery moving away from Borodyanka in February 2024. So, in a sense, Russia not being the same, although mistakes are made, although sometimes they can look extremely ham-fisted and retarded. Let's be honest, a lot of people in Timor, criminals, sometimes do not understand why some things happen to the Russians. But also the posture has changed. I want you guys to start checking the losses for tanks this month. You're going to see they're going to be a lot less more important, despite the Russians being on the offense, than, let's say, October 2023 or even January, February 2024. This happens mostly because now the Russians are on the exploiting phase. They know the damage they've done, they know where they are, and they're going to do exactly what they did between May and June 2022 in Luganda. So I expect a couple of changes. Also, IV numbers went down. IV number of losses went down. Logical, pretty logical. They have gone through that open space that they need to cross over. Plus, they had some luck with the trenches. The Ukraine had made trenches from a very advanced spot towards the Ocheretyne. And also they're panicking. And of course, UMPK. So what to expect? That's the simplest thing that I'm going to talk about. First of all, I think they're going to take Keramik Novokalinove on the eastern side of the highway from Avdiivka towards Konstantinovka. And then on the western side of that highway, they're going to go for Arkhangelsk and then Novoalexandrovka. That's, in my opinion, going to be the farthest point. They're going to go with this threshold. So within the month of June. Down, they're going to gobble up the first line of defense. Now they're completely bypassed it. And they are going to continue as far as possible, probably in order to have a small buffer in case of counter-offensive. Then a bit more south, they're going to reach the Karlovka Reservoir, and via Nitalova, they're going to try to push on the southern flank. And by trying to get Krasnogorivka, hopefully within 3 to 4 weeks, the whole city plus the extension towards the body of water is done. And then, as I said, you're going to have a small cauldron between Nitalova and the flank of Krasnogorivka, which would push the Ukrainians to abandon those posts. That would be the best option. Given the Ukrainians are the way they are, they're most probably going to start resisting on the lowland, getting hammered, win some time, because that's also the case. That's also the reason here. And finally pull out somewhere around June, 5th or 6th of June. Do not forget, this situation is not as simple as it looks. The assaults that we're seeing around Krasnogorivka are mostly to make the Ukrainians understand that they're going to lose the whole line towards Ugledar. And one of the targets of the Krasnogorivka operation is to push downstream most of the Ukrainians towards Kurakovo. Once Kurakovo is overloaded, it's going to get treated by UMPK and whatever you want. And the Ukrainians would have to choose if they want to have a line of defense on the bodies of water, Karlovka, Kurakovo, and so on, or if they want to counterattack, because having that line of defense on the bodies of water means also that the Russians can more easily resist in case of counterattack. With the risk, of course, of trying to have a counterattack from the low ground to the upper ground. And we see what that gives mostly. Then it's Ugledar. Ugledar is the biggest thorn in the flank of the Russian military right now. Let's be honest. Of course, there is still the Kupiansk area, but that's a lot less problematic, let's be honest. Because for the Kupiansk area, both sides have huge natural obstacles. And my opinion would be, if the Ukrainians are really stupid enough, they should try a counter over there, where the Russians are quote-unquote thinner, but where they can also get the reinforcements a lot faster than Zaporozhye. So yeah, generally what I'm expecting is, and Trapp put it very eloquently, a straightening of the line all over southern Donbass to central Donbass, especially the buffer zone in the Donetsk agglomeration. And once that is done, and you are starting to threaten faraway places like Pokrovsk, Mirgorod, and so on, you're going to have a notch towards Konstantinovka. Once Konstantinovka falls or is threatened to the point when the Ukrainians are going to start having Forteza Konstantinovka bullshit, then you know that the gig is on, and the Ukrainians will have to absolutely go in a counteroffensive to relieve that position. So, yeah, that was the tactical review of the Donetsk area with a little bit of talk, chit-chat over American help. If you have any kind of, intervention to make, or you want to contribute anything, it's your turn, guys. Okay, go on, Kremlin.
Hey, I got a question. It's kind of like a little bit, how should I put it? Not necessarily technical, but what is the take you guys have on the situation with this guy, Timur Ivanov?
Oh, well, let's be honest, the problem with Ivanov is illustration of how business is done generally in the defense apparatus everywhere. The point is that I think it is politically charged. I think that the group he was part of, he was a UVZ guy. He had a lot of construction projects. He was in charge at some point also of overseeing hypergolics for the Russian Space Force and shit like that. Let's say that his lifestyle was absolutely not corresponding to his role generally. And this is my opinion, guys. So don't. It's a really simple case of tolerated corruption, but which had results, I think, within the current military operation. And at some point, he had to go. In a certain case, it's a lighter. It's a lighter situation with a lot of his circle because apparently they are entrapped because of three specific cases early 2021, which have repercussions for the current military operation. But if you read about him, and you see his pictures, this guy cannot be a deputy defense minister if there is no corruption within the Russian military industrial complex. It's mind-boggling, and the worst part of it is that the private stories are even. I mean, like those are stories that in the West you're gonna see from contractors, from people at Raytheon, from people at Lokmart, or in private. So basically, these guys, where they go out of public service, they have quote unquote helped in multiple projects, and then they get paid back as consultants with cash, with lavish responsibility posts and stuff like that. This guy was deputy minister of defense, and he would spend 1 to 2 million a year just to maintain his lifestyle. We are going to, I'm sorry guys, into places where maybe it doesn't look that much, but it was a huge problem, I think, for a lot of people to justify actions of a person like him. And once again, we are jokingly, whitewashing Shoigu, but this guy is also part of the people he brought in. Of course, the Ivanov was part of the Prigozhin entourage. So basically, the consortium where Ivanov was a CEO for a while helped build shit for Prigozhin. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people are saying that it has nothing to do, it's not a revenge about that, that the bribe and corruption case is real, which once again, I'm not discussing at all. I mean, you need to read about his lifestyle, about what he did, about how he spent his time to understand that this cannot be, even a high placed bureaucrat cannot be at that point. He was living the life of an oligarch. But generally speaking, I want to repeat, as I said, this is a problem on any military industrial complex around the globe, given that it's mostly public money, and in order to get that public money that has shrunk within the last 30 years, well, you need to play ball in a sense. But generally speaking, yes, I think that it is a marker of the level of corruption within the military-industrial complex in Russia, which had appalling results. Let's be honest. At the beginning of the war, Russia should have had eons of systems. They had the capability, they had capacity, they had everything. But I would like to recall a lot of people here. I was discussing on how the fuck does the Russian military, with all its planning, its nice PowerPoint sheet and everything, still rely on a single column communication for a whole brigade. We're not speaking BTGs. These guys were like with a company level, NATO company level communication system that was allegedly able to support the whole brigade. So of course, once you lost one or two clusters, everything was going to shit. Then we had the discussions about how the Azad radios were actually repackaged Chinese, but that's not the problem. I mean, Hytera is Chinese. It's a very good radio. That's not the problem. The problem is that you had overinflating prices for the quality that was delivered, and also a complete misunderstanding of what was done. And that's how you have people like Rogozin talking shit about silent hexacopters. I'm like, oh my God, for fuck's sake, just shut up. That, in a sense, Ivanov was the symptom of something that is still not going that well with the Russian MIC. But given that now they're forced to put up, doesn't matter what they're putting up, those things are going to get started to be changed. And also people that are now controlling the steps are realizing where the problems were. And this is not something that was hidden. Most of it was barely hidden. It's just that in order to go forward and also to see how much fucking money is being spent and how much result is being gotten from the Russians right now, they don't understand where the budgets have gone. In a sense, it's not what the NAFO describes, where like only 10% has been spent. No, money has been spent for exact projects. The problem is that prices were overinflated and the quality wasn't always top notch. But we are not at 90% theft and 10% influx. Right now, given that we are in this warpath of the Russian industrial potential, people can understand that, wait, we can have your gun barrel for the same price as it was 10 years ago. How the fuck does it mean? Where did the inflation go? And then you understand where it go when the inflation went. And I'm going to repeat, as I said, the biggest problem with any kind of military or command industry during a non-productive phase. Non-productive phase means that for war industry, you're not having a war, you're just producing shit and you're not using it. So basically, let's say you are a controller for the Ministry of Defense of Bantuistan, and you are checking how many fucking million rounds do we have? We have 80 million. That's good enough. How much do we need to basically order? 500,000, fine, because they're going to cover your sales or your training. But once you get into the productive phase and the expense phase, so basically right now you're shooting that artillery, you understand that, oh wait, why do the ammunition cost 6,000 euros for 155 millimeters? And then you understand because of how far the bribery, how far the theft went. But now it is compounded by the fact that you need everything right away. And this happened also to the Russian military industry. It was too big, it wasn't needed, and in order to be kept alive, you need to have people bribing around and financing projects that are not logical, are not necessary. Although those are strategic industries, and people like Ivanov come perfectly well in that area because they are able to have the ear of the boss, in this case Shoigu, who has the ear of the big boss, and at the same time, you're gonna have all these projects where things are also the same because you're gonna build housing for military, fine. You're gonna spend twice as much as you should spend for it, but at the end, given that you are spending for it, you are reevaluating your military force, so everybody's happy. There is this Potemkin village thinking when it comes to how the Russian military was revamped between 2008 and 2017 with a huge problem with Serdyukov, who established very subtle ways of basically pillaging the budget, nonetheless by buying foreign. But I think Ivanov is really a symptom of that era, and hopefully things are going to change for most of them. Theft and corruption will still remain in these sectors. It's impossible otherwise. The only way to reduce it would be to go Asian on them, so Chinese or Vietnamese, when you are looking at the death sentence. But that's not going to happen. Only way to have a death sentence is what happened to Prigozhin. So that's my take. If other people have other takes, no problem. I mean, I would rather hear by Snake about this situation because I'm pretty sure that he has a good idea about how fucked up a case needs to be that your deputy minister of defense is being arrested live in the middle of the biggest military operation of the modern Russian history. So, Snake, if you have anything to add, up to you, man. If you have anything else to ask, it's your turn. Unless, Kremlin, you have something else to ask.
Yeah, something like this is actually quite unusual, as you said. Like, if they really want to get rid of somebody, they would do it through a kind of soft purge or through a way that's deniable. But like in this way, like this is direct. This is actually like this is supposed to send a message to whoever the group that this guy was involved in, as well as Shoigu, if he was some kind of patron. Of course, the other thing about this is like construction. Like construction is easily the industry with the most corruption potential of anything because you can hide so many ways, so many avenues of theft through the mispricing materials, right?
Don't worry about that. I'm Albanian, and I'm pretty sure that General would say the same. It's our laundry industry number one in Albania, so I completely agree with you on that. So go on. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, I mean the other thing I wanted to point out, which is actually quite interesting, is like I looked over the PDA announcement, and I mean what's interesting is 1 billion equivalent, and what is missing from it is actually Patriot missiles. I think which is actually quite interesting because again, a certain portion of them have been allocated to Israel, of course, but sometime last year I estimated the available stockpile of Patriot missiles in the U.S. to be around 2,000. And if we're assuming a burn rate on average, some months more, some months less, about 100 per month, and basically like you're going like 14, 15 months, you're looking at like drawing down most of that stockpile. So they just have to kind of wait for new production, and the amount that's remaining is probably going to be earmarked for Israel anyway, right?
Yes, actually, I didn't want to talk about the Patriots because I'm waiting for the second PDA that's going to be announced before going all guns blazing by saying they don't have anything that's dry. But I completely agree with you. Even if they are not dry, the fact that they're looking around for people to give ready standing stocks, like they are now trying to slut shame Spain, trying to slut shame Greece. They had a go at Germany, and of course, Germany being the Germany we know, they caved in and said, okay, we're going to send another Patriot battery, which means we don't know if it's a Pack 3 or Pack 2. If it's a Pack 2,
it's a Pack 2. It's a Pack 2. And the thing with Germany is like they're supposed to get that factory online to produce Pack 2 missiles by 2027.
Yeah.
So they're a few years off, but I mean they will be able to replenish themselves eventually.
Yeah,
This is
for
why
sure.
they're probably pressuring Germany the most right now. What's actually interesting is that with what's actually interesting is Greece, and they're off and on. They're offering both the S-300s and the Patriots, but PAC-3s, which also goes to show too the U.S. might be running a little bit dry on the PAC-3s as well.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. And as we had the discussion previously, the Greeks are super happy to give whatever people want, but they want in exchange the whole fucking insurance about Turkey not attacking them as bollocks. But what they want, they've already notified, they're going to get rid of the S-300 the moment the Americans give them THAAD. And
I mean
that's,
that is a tall ask because THAAD, as far as I'm aware of, like the interceptors are barely in production. I mean, the production rate is like between 40 and 50 a year. So they're gonna get THAAD maybe when hell freezes over. That's
yeah, no, no,
basically.
no. But I think that's why the Greeks are asking it, because they don't want to get into the situation that we are going to see the Germans. Sorry if I interrupt you. Whereas they are going to give something that paid a certain amount, but it's there. It's okay. Maybe it's not the top notch right now, but it's still functional. It works. But then the replacement is going to cost them another grand, and that's the problems that the Greeks have right now. There is a problem of money. They want more money for their more bang for their buck, if you want. And what is being proposed to the Greeks is, I think, half another battery to replace the current Telsa they have. It's half another battery of Pack 3 right away, and then another battery and a half of Pack 3 within 3 to 4 years. I don't even know if I could believe what is being proposed, quote unquote, given the production rate for America itself, but also, like, I'm not gonna start a comparison between S300 PMU and Pack 3. That's not the point. But it's clear that Greece is using the PMU for a completely different approach than the Pack 3. So I barely understand. I understand the Greeks, but I barely understand the offer that was made allegedly to them in order for them to get rid of the S300. And on the other side, when you see the number of missiles that the Greeks had, I'm like, it will barely make a dent. It's going to be what, 170 missiles, something like that.
Yeah, I
So
mean it's just.
it's better than nothing, of course.
I mean, it was good for about a couple months of firing. That's basically.
Yeah,
I
maybe.
mean, it's
I agree with you.
yeah. I mean, this does open up a lot of possibilities because I mean, it does also seem like Frankenbuch might be actually there in sufficient number to cover short range, and this might be their way of actually putting the Ukraine on budget and just giving them Sparrow missiles because they basically have an unlimited number of those.
Yeah, sure, but
Um,
then we have another problem, because the Frank and Sam is going to be fine for KH, for Shahids, for maybe a upcoming Russian light cruise missile a la Delilah or stuff like that. But it doesn't do anything for the main killer of AD, of strategic AD right now, which is, well, it's the Iskander, sometimes Tornado S, but mostly Iskander. And this makes such a huge difference, because even today, as I said, they lost another P-18, another early warning radar. Okay, it's not state of the art, it's not huge, but it is there. It allows them to recover. So a lot of people, I mean, even this discussion about NASAMS becoming a ABM light, I was like, okay, fine, let's try it. But it just means, as you said, that they are now understanding that interceptors need to be cheap, even if they're not perfect. And I agree with you. Introducing this Frank and Sam is fine, and I actually, it's a very good on their feet thinking, but it doesn't do anything for the main killer of their main strategic asset, on top of the main killer of headquarters accumulation of troops and so on, which is of course the Iskander. I don't know, man. Honestly, is there maybe time for them to do something with the Air Force, or is there maybe time to start trying to talk to Russia in another way than there is no way you guys are going to win? Because I think maybe trying to goad Russia into lowering the intensity of warfare right now might have more of a chance than trying to, pat it on the battlefield. Just food for thought.
Yeah, there's another point I wanted to bring up is, and we had a back and forth on Twitter, but I don't think we necessarily communicated what the point was. But looking at the civilian economy, I mean, I was actually surprised to find out that, I mean, the majority of contributions to the Ukrainian budget come from taxes. And looking at the FDI flows and other things, like, it's actually kind of remarkable that there is something of a functional civilian economy. I mean, it's propped up by external aid and IMF loans, but it does seem to be. I mean, this by the way explains why they're so trepidatious about doing conscription, because the thing is, there is a very real balancing act, as there is in Russia. In Ukraine's economy is actually stabilizing, but if they over conscript, what happens to that economy? What happens to those green shoots that are beginning to sort of manifest? And we can speculate on the reasons why this is allowed to happen, but the point is, this is why I think the conscription is not going to go as people expect, and they're really going to have to weigh the concerns of the civilian economy, because that's where the majority of the budgetary contributions come from.
Oh yeah, but
right?
I described. I mean, we had actually the discussion we had about Kriva Rog, for instance, was more about the fact that I'm 100% sure that there's a lot of lies going on. But I completely agree with you that, and we did the math together, that these guys, for over $40 billion of their budget, it's contributions straight from their economy. So there is still something of a functional economy. It is a lot more reduced, and the alleyways when these guys are taking the money are very specific. And I mean, I'm gonna tell it as it is. There is a lot of voluntary contribution, which is also happening with the quote unquote, which is also happening with the Russian military industry payments. So a lot of people had said that there was a small portion of their pay that was volunteered to the defense. The same is happening for a lot of private enterprises on the Ukrainian side. And the funny thing is that themselves they said, oh, if we find ways to actually get between 5 and 13 no, it was 15 and 15 and 40 billion hryvnias over, which was like 1 or 2 billion dollars extra, and you're like, wow. And then otherwise I said, and then we started to retax the companies, and then we found another 8 billion, and you're like, wait a minute, how the hell does it work? And it works because there are a lot of things that are not said in Ukraine, and right now the economy is working because, as I said, sometimes there is this injection of foreign funds, but on the other side, I'm absolutely agreeing with you. Some things that can be done from Russia in order to make sure that the Ukrainian economy doesn't work. And we're not speaking about the power problem itself, so not for electricity or water. No, we're speaking about, for instance, making sure that the cost of living goes up, simply as that. And the Ukrainians themselves are, in a certain sense, are going towards there. If you read recently, they want to get the price of the kilowatt hour in Ukraine from about 2.7 to 3.5 hryvnia per kilowatt hour, which at the current, status would mean a almost 30% raise. But we are discussing about an economy which pays in average between 500 and 600 euros or $600 a month. And you are getting a boost to the electricity price of 30%. It's not as bad as in countries like Belgium or Germany, but it's still, almost half the price from the French, and the French have a monthly revenue 4 times as in average as high as the Ukrainians, which, and I go back to what you said, seems to be, yeah, we can discuss the reasons, but it seems to be also a way for the Russians to actually get the pressure on the society first. And it's not just getting them to have no water or electricity, but making the everyday life as unbearable as possible, so that people would just like to go away, which is what they have already done multiple times, actually. And I agree with you, they would have to make sure that they don't break the economic sector. But on the other side, one of the things that makes me a bit worried is that the Ukrainians have completely integrated the war economy within their private economy. And I would take one example. The Russians blew the nuclear piping institute in Sumy, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. That stuff was still standing after 2 years. And it was making piping, it was making drones, it was making parts for drones, and of course it was a small workshop. The drone part was a small workshop, but the strategic value of it, with that they could repair NPPs, they could repair TPPs. So you are into this mental image that either we don't understand what the Russians are doing sometimes, and this is what I said during the space, that sometimes you are asking yourself, what the fuck? And I mean, you read me. I went crazy because, like, what are you doing? It's 2 years. You take that shit out. They cannot service half of the TPPs right away. They cannot service their turbines for their hydro centrals. What the fuck? And then you understand that maybe it is because they want them to, and it could be because later on they want to recover something functional and not have to restart everything from zero. But to me, you're 2 years in this war. You're not trying to get to Sumy. After 3 to 4 months of thinking, quote unquote, I would have blown it away right away. But this is one example to saying that they have integrated their war economy into as they fucking call it, I hate this fucking term, as a kind of startup economy of war, where everybody is doing something, and that's keeping them alive because the funding to pay them also comes from abroad.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing that's also recovering is FDI. And something must be done to sort of scare the foreign investors away, because once the West starts sinking their money into Ukraine and thinking it's investable, then other ideas follow. And we can't really, it's intangible. We can't see where it's going at this moment. But down the line, a year, 2 years, I mean, these are sort of potentially bad outcomes if the West gets too involved in this shit.
Yeah, I understand. I agree with you. If you start building your projects and you're trying to protect them, in a sense, the ArcelorMittal at Kryvyi Rog is a bit like that. Only it's not the West, but it's a Indian investor, and Russia doesn't want to be in bad blood. But for that one, I'm gonna, because I just wanna also make my mea culpa, because I was a bit more upfront of that. The Russians can literally cut that plant right away without even thinking twice by doing 3 things. As I said, first of all, completely fucking up the railroad around the plant. That would take at least 1 to 2 months just to redo the railroad. And also, that's what happened to Lipetsk recently. They sent a drone to blow up the oxygenation and pressure units, and they're out for now 3 days. The units are being rebuilt and replaced. But you do that with Ukraine, it's a lot more complicated to replace those same units, and you don't destroy the tool. The fixed investment is still there. What you do, you destroy something, and you make the work in there almost impossible. And it brings you 2 things. First of all, of course, the price of steel is going down, so there is not that much margin to make. Although for Ukraine, any single fucking hryvnia is important. But at the same time, as you said, nobody's going to start investing in Ukraine if things like that are going to happen. And of course, there is the transit and the export route that Ukrainians say was free, which probably was in a certain sense. be that through Romania or be that through the cabotage they are doing south of Odessa. But overall, I agree with you. At some point, you need to make sure that people don't get the wrong idea about this country is at war. This country, at every kind of moment, is going to lose that territory. And Zaporozhye is the best example of that. If the war goes the way it's going right now, Zaporozhye, within 10 years, would have to be signed off as a Russian territory, as a Russian oblast. So I agree with you. Something needs to be done there. And I would like to say that it's tactical, but I don't believe so. I really think that the Russians have other rabbits to chase right now. But by doing, this military focus, they are, in a certain sense, making the same mistakes that the Ukrainians did in 2023, when they completely took the eyes out of the real price for the Russians, which is the Russians inflicted enough damage to the power system in 2022. They could have a follow-up. They didn't do that. And now when they struck again, and it was really a short period, it was literally 4 days. In 4 days, they inflicted such damage to the Ukrainian grid that the Ukrainians themselves right now are saying, we are being forced to make quick repairs if you want to have that grid ready for the winter. But we were in March, Last year they started doing that in June, and they were more or less ready by November. So once again, I completely agree with you on the fact that there are things that are extremely puzzling. Is that incompetence? Is that some kind of deal? Although I really think that they just are focusing on making the military situation impossible, because by having a bad military situation, then you need, as you said, to take off more out of this labor pool, this labor revenue pool, and you disturb the whole logic of the current survival economy that they have. My biggest, counterpoint on that would be that in any case, if they want to really put 500,000 people under the flag, they will have to completely smash part of the economy. So it will be either starting to grab people from universities, so the fake students that we spoke about, or grab people from abroad by forcing them via the whole consular stop that they did, and say, okay, you don't have a passport, you're going to be deported from, Germany, France, and so on, and welcome to the army, son. But other than that, I agree with you that something needs to be done in the trend of the Ukrainian economy to be seen as worth investing. Although, Finch and Moody's have thrashed the economy's outlook for the next 5 to 10 years. And the other problem is with Ukrainians is that even if people start looking at them as worth investing, especially in the west of the country, at the end of the day, the trump card, and we know now that the Russians can do it, is the Dnieper, is the crossing of the Dnieper. So maybe it's that I always think that they can always do it, that at some point they can blow most of the bridges, forcing the country to, have to choose between what they want to do. I don't know, but I agree with you that something has to be done in medium term, at least for the outlook. Oh, I think we don't. Okay, General, I'm sorry, you asked for twice, but I was too long. I invited you again if you want. So, well, guys, as I said, the most important part right now is to watch how far they will go with the PDAs and with the aid that is visible or not visible.
Hey.
Go on, man. It's your turn.
Thank you. I was reading about the Jankoi hit, and it seems that the main point were not the tells and everything, but they have this system which is Fundamentum,
Yeah.
a sort of connection node, C4 node for all their stratified air defense.
Yes.
And probably the fact that they went for it and they knew it was there. Okay, we know they have great intelligence by the Western powers, but maybe it's hinting at they definitely are going for the bridge as a PR. And with the supply of these attack AMs, I think they are going to imitate a little what the Russians are doing with the Iskanders. So minimal reaction time, the loop is closed and pretty much tight. So and the numbers are there. So maybe they will try to do something like, okay, we have the intelligence, the train is coming, let's hit the train because it's precise and it's fast and everything. So trying to balance little the.
Yeah, but that would mean anyway. The problem with the train would mean that you would have to target train stations, train stops, hangars, and stuff like that. Um, what you are going to force, and this is the problem that they have, it's not only the railroad that is problematic. You got also the road network. One of the things that the Russians did well during the counter, they understood the whole backfield theory that I explained a couple of times, which is the more you go back, the more you thin your backfield, the easier it is for the other side to be able to hit everywhere. But as for Fundament M, it's still not being proven. I know that it was a lot of chit chat, but I still do not see where the Fundament M would have been. The scarring and the burning marks all over the base would have been closer to the mid apron and on the secondary corner. So basically, where there was where they previously had helicopters. There is no major charring in there. There is grass burned, but when you compare the charring with the battery itself, you can see when the battery is scorched, it's done for. The tells are still there, pictures are there. But for the fundament, there is not such pictures that have appeared. And given the way it's supposed to look, it's a much larger system than what they are pretending. On the other side, the attempt to attack the Comuna ship with Neptune, which led to little to no damage to the ship, also shows that whatever they have attempted in Jankoi, although it's a completely different, I'd say, completely different alleyway because it's in Sevastopol, which is about 130 kilometers from Jankoi. It still shows that the AD is performing. Is it as good as it was at the beginning of the war? Now, after 2 years of being battered and tested, I'd say in some areas yes, some areas no. But I do not think that Ukrainians had any success against Fundamentum. They also said that they hit the 77th local repair base. We don't see that. There is no other scorched equipment around, and they had the chance to actually score a bigger hit in the apron next to it. When you see where the battery is, you have an apron that's still full of equipment. They didn't manage to hit there. Although I have another theory, and I would like to share with you. If these missiles were of the 300 kilometer range, and they were APAM, so basically anti-personal anti-material, so with bomblets, the payload is a lot smaller. With a 165 kilometer APAM, you have over 590 kilometers of payload, which would cover a huge area. With the 300 kilometers, it drops down to 175 or 200 kilograms of payload, which reduces extensively the area you're going to cover with your submunitions. Therefore,
It
yeah, go on, man. Yeah, I lost you, man, bro. You can, if you can speak, go on. Guys, if you can.
physical, the physical dimension of the launcher limits it what it can have. So minor load, minor explosive load, and bigger range. I guess that's the thing that the Russians can also push the Iskander so much in their case. And
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. But that's what I'm saying. That for everything so far, every single claim on Jankoi, we've had proof. We've had close-ups. We have analysis from the ground. And once again, I would like to outline two things with Ukrainian sources leaking Russian sources. The attack on Jankoi shows that what the reality based on satellite image and so on showed, and what the Ukrainians wanted to convey with the Telegram canal spy dossier, so spy file dossier spiona, is that they are going to over exaggerate the claims. The Russians do the same, by the way. I'm not going to start discussing. I trust only what I see when it comes to damages, because we had the most recent strike on a S300 PMU S400 tracking radar, which was a complete failure, by the way. They pretend that the missiles were aimed too short, but given how the Tivas group has failed multiple times in targeting, whereas except for very limited one-shot targets, the two clusters, one I think was a decoy, and the other S300, they claim S300V cluster, they were hit only once or twice while the whole barrage was fired. This means that these people are firing from their most extreme range, which means that you get the drift on the missile accuracy in the terminal stage. For the attack on Jankoi, the ATACMS that was used, if it's 300 kilometers, once again, we haven't been able to see the marker, and we have some photos of the intercepted missiles, because two were most probably intercepted, or at least grazed enough to go outside of their targeting zone, is that they would have fired them from as long as possible. And the image shown by the Ukrainians themselves, 6 launches from M270s, do seem to indicate that they were way beyond Zaporozhye. So,
they are scared.
yep, that's what
Lancets and drones,
that's
seeing
that's
everything.
what I mean, and this is the problem that we're having right now, is that I think the 300 were given in March, according to, once again, Jake Sullivan. They were given the 12th of March, or they were agreed upon 12th of March. And what did we saw the 9th of March? We saw a Patriot going to bits. The very next day, a HIMARS was attacked and hit. And 4 or 5 days before that, we had the most evident example of a HIMARS launcher getting completely wasted. And a day before that one, we had two HIMARS launchers being wasted on thermal image. So as you say, they are scared, but what I'm seeing here is that it is more a tactical necessity to give them the ATACMS rather than the will to extend the range from where they're firing right now. They just want not to lose more assets. They just want the Ukrainians to lose less assets, at the same time have more payload. But when you think about it, if they had given unitary warheads, this is one of the discussions I had, to me it makes no sense to give unitary warheads to Ukraine to fire it only in Ukraine, because in Ukraine there are no planes. And the biggest problem that we're having right now, if you're a Ukrainian fighter, is that there is an asshole with two assholes actually on a Russian Sukhoi 34 who flies 70 kilometers from your position, just release some ugly dumb fuck gliding bombs. They get to go to their place, drink some tea, and those things absolutely annihilate whatever is around you. And to me, it makes absolutely no sense to give these systems and not let them fire into a Russian military bases. I cannot, like, especially the unitary one, which would, hit maybe not has, because the Russians don't like hardened shelters, but crux points, so MTO centers, ammunition depots that usually are a bit more fortified and stuff like that. To me, it makes no sense to give them, to employ them uniquely in Ukraine, but apparently that's what I've been promised. So then is the second part, what the Americans want from Ukrainians is to be safe while firing this shit towards the Russians. And that's it. But in my opinion, and this is where I'm a bit, as I said, a bit confused, is that, okay, you gave them 100 ATACMS and they used them a bit before the aid was voted, and the use of them is, okay, not a fiasco. We're not going to exaggerate. They hit that S-300, 400 battery, but then what? Were they expected to hit helicopters? Given.
It's a show of will, I think.
Sure, I
We
agree.
we have the numbers. With HIMARS, they couldn't do much damage to inner bases in Russia, so we have the big ones now, and from far away. So probably that's it. I don't believe too that they will won't not be shooting them to the
No,
airfields because they're. But it's happening. Maybe not at the beginning. So they'll start with Crimea and the rest of the front line, but then I'm confident that they're going to do something even, and then we'll see some big booms in, I don't know what's left of the energy grid, maybe the hydropower or the bridges.
Yeah, that's my
It
biggest problem right now, is that if you want to do something with the Atacams, you should at least either give them in major numbers, or then try to bulletproof the retaliation targets. But none of that exists, and the problem is that, of course, Ukraine is a huge country when it comes to air defense, so you cannot cover them like it's Luxembourg or Andorra. So yeah, on that aspect, I have no fucking idea. What I'm scared about is how fast are they gonna induct the F-16? Because what I'm seeing right now, they don't look, at least what the French are discussing, they don't look ready at all for July. And if these people keep going like this for 2 months, in Donetsk, in the Donetsk Oblast, there is no coming back. If the Russians seize all the bodies of water from Kurakovo up to Progress, it's done. You are not getting the oblast back without sacrificing whatever you're going to mobilize this year. And that's how the counteroffensive completely destroyed the fighting capability of the Ukrainian army, by being an absolute waste of equipment, waste of people, waste of resources. And now, if you are starting this pushback in an even worse place, imagine the Russians having choke points and the heights on the central Donetsk Oblast and waiting for you, and you are back to this absurd 100 men, 100 KIA per kilometer in any direction. You're going to lose maybe twice or thrice as much for the counter, but you're going to be sure that you're not going to get your land back. So this is my biggest issue that I have right now. I want to understand where is the logic with this.
The numbers in the F-16 are very
Yeah,
little. I'm more declined to think about the Gripens because it's 1 year they are training on them, so they had more time, and the platform, it's as short-legged as the F-16. So that's the real question, or maybe some Mirage.
I agree with you. Right now, nothing makes sense on that area. So either we're gonna get a huge surprise, but on the other side, let's see what happened with the MiG-29s that were used to actually bomb the front line with gliding and powered bombs. They lost all three of them because they needed the tempo. They parked them in Dnipropetrovsk, and the drones found them. and Iskander found them. And this is what makes me extremely worry of the sense of urgency on the European side. Like, are these people even aware that Ukrainians are losing the war? If so, what's the deal? You know what I mean? And this makes me, once again, I'm either going to have a surprise there, either there's no surprise and we can like close the lid over the war. It's just going to be a more macabre, creeping stalemate, kind of rolling, snowballing westwards from the Donetsk Oblast until the Russians are satisfied with their position and start, making their own demands. But realistic one, quote unquote, not whatever was said like that. I know that a lot of people are going to get super angry about those demands because I don't think that those demands are going to be for this and stuff like that. But those demands are going to hurt Ukraine a lot more because, as I said, there are going to be realistic ones and based on what happens on the battlefield, on the ground. And this is my major, fear is that the Ukrainians right now are out of their mind and their quote unquote Western allies, what they want is that the war is pushed to this paroxysm when it comes to violence, but on the ground, on the paper, and on the strategic outcome of the war itself doesn't change anymore. You know that we have the direction where it's going to go, which is east to west, and is it going to go 20 kilometers, 40 kilometers, 400 kilometers? At the end, it doesn't really matter because for the EU and the US, the Dnieper is going to be the red line, quote unquote. But if Russia is at the Dnieper, you have half your country that's gone. It makes no more sense to even speak about victory or defeat or whatever. Then you're going to have this whole discussion about what should be given to Russia in order for the situation not to escalate. Although the Russians, I don't think they're going to escalate anything. If they have the Dnieper line, it's done. For them, it's half of Kiev, it's Dnipropetrovsk, it's Zaporozhye. And of course, they're missing part of Kherson and a part of, Zaporozhye. Who the hell cares at the end? The Dnieper is, in my opinion, a way better border than the oblasts themselves.
It's very difficult to predict long term. I think most predictions are like 1 or 2 month time frame can be accurate. Then the rest, it's not. I understand the river, the natural barriers and the way they were used in border thing in every country.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have died. A lot of damage was done, even to Russians, to settle for less. It's Fitoris Epiros,
Yeah, exactly, exactly,
Tibia.
exactly. But
So
that's also my point of view. I don't think that the Russians are going to do anything less than what they actually annexed. But we will see. My biggest problem with the Russian mind right now in this war, and this is something that Snake said as well, that sometimes you don't really understand what they mean. Is it a war? Is it like a fighting negotiation? Is it them, being cucks or what's going on? But at the end, and as we are seeing with Ocheretyne, with the advances that I made on the axis and so on, no, they're fucking dead serious. It's just that they are playing with a rhythm, this false rhythm of willing to do things but not willing to do them, being forced to. But at the same time, they also were ready to settle for a lot fucking less. That's what we heard both with the naval agreement they want to sign in March 2024, and also with the agreement that they wanted to sign in March 2022. So, in a sense, I completely agree with you. We cannot predict much, except maybe where one or the other side wants to go, or what one or the other side wants to do. But as for, me telling you things are going to happen, it's extremely complicated. It's true that it happened with the Avdiivka front, but it's such a small pattern, such a small place, and in a sense, it made sense describing it like that after analyzing the counter. But going forward with all that we don't know, so for instance, how much is going to be on the next PDA, when it's going to be the next PDA, how much really is in the Russians' tank, because this is also the problem. The Russians seem to have a lot in their tanks right now and do not seem faced by losses or by, delays. But we had the same feeling in July, August 2022, and then suddenly the Russians decided this operational pause that was more aimed to prepare the attack towards central Donetsk with Bakhmut, but that resulted in two huge counterattacks from the Ukrainians, and it cost them part of the Kherson Oblast and, of course, a large part of the Kharkov Oblast. So on that, I agree with you, and ironically, I think that's a positive for the Russians. The fact that the Ukrainians do not know what they are going to do, because everybody's now talking about this task force in the north, but we're not seeing anyone from there. Everybody's panicking over attack on Sumy, on Kharkov, and so on. I think if that was true somehow, you would have satellite images like there were the last time that thing happened. So let's see exactly where it's going, and I agree with you. But some situations do not seem very serious on.
I don't know if you saw the PDA. They were talking about javelins, Carl Gustav's
Yeah,
Taus
short range.
in big
Yeah,
numbers.
short.
So I was thinking, the way that the persons don't fight the fight of the future, but the past
Yeah.
one. Maybe they are trying, they know it's coming in Sumy and in Kharkov, so they are trying to do the mobile ATGM thing they did when the Russians came in
Yeah.
first in the same area.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
I don't.
But don't forget, one of the things that I want frankly the Ukrainians also to remember is that in Kharkov, when they started the war, they still had, due to, of course, the absolute lack of preparedness on the Russian side, they could fly a facton of drones. Even Bayraktars were hitting the Russians. In the Kharkov area, the few early Bayraktars that were shot down were even trying to penetrate into Russian territory. But yeah, I agree with you. What they're giving right now seems a very puzzling choice. But maybe, as you said, it is to try and force them down to a more old style type of battle with urban combat, because okay, the javelin is more for open, but and loud with its very short range, as you said, with mobile teams and stuff like that, looks more like urban combat, and Kharkov makes perfect sense. So guys, if someone else wants to intervene, it's up to you. Otherwise, it will be time. Thank you very much for being here, and we will see how it goes. We'll have a recap for the 1st of May. Actually, I'm going to do that the 30th of April. But meanwhile, I'm going to be a little less accessible for professional reasons. And I'll still be trolling on Twitter. Don't you worry about that. But for the rest of it, thank you very much. And have a nice day.